That daybreak unfolded much like countless ones before in our towering apartment on the 28th level, with a view of the Houston cityscape stirring from its rest. The atmosphere remained crisp, carrying the faint remnants of nocturnal moisture through the balcony door I deliberately kept cracked open. I'd always cherished that ambiance, the profound stillness. It felt like the vast metropolis was pausing to catch its breath right before diving into its relentless rhythm. I glided quietly over the chilled stone tiles. It was a practice I'd honed through the years to avoid disturbing Demetrius, my spouse, the heart of my existence for the last 11 years. My daily regimen felt like a soothing ceremony. Prepare one shot of espresso, linger on the terrace to savor the wind against my skin, then proceed to the washroom to prepare. It all ran on instinct, actions ingrained deep in my limbs and frame. In the lavatory, adorned with shades of cream and tarnished gold fixtures, I twisted the warm water tap to cleanse my face and began scrubbing my teeth. The sharp peppermint paste bubbled up, flooding my senses with its potency. Then, amid the steady rhythm of the bristles, it caught my eye. Demetrius's smartphone lay on the stone countertop beside the almost depleted container of hand wash. Its display, previously a solid void, abruptly illuminated, casting a harsh light that stung in the dim space. An alert appeared on the secured interface, not from his office group discussion or a schedule alert. The contact listed was unknown, a moniker Demetrius had never uttered aloud. Zara. And beneath it, a brief note, one potent enough to halt my reality. Eager for our getaway to the cabin this weekend. The wine and that exquisite intimate apparel I picked up. The timer starts now. My arm halted abruptly. The brush remained between my lips, yet sensation vanished. The refreshing mint lather turned acrid and alien, trickling down from the edge of my mouth as it melted away. My gaze locked onto the device's glow. I scanned the words repeatedly, hunting for an alternate interpretation, a chance for error, space for doubt. Our cabin, intimate apparel. Each term drove like a spike deep into my chest. From behind the frosted enclosure of the stall, the rush of water echoed. Demetrius was bathing. His faint melody drifted out. It was that vintage New Orleans jazz melody he favored on drives. The splash of the stream, mixed with his light-hearted tune, rang like cruel irony. I stood rooted by the proof of infidelity laid bare in stark detail, while he, mere feet distant, commenced his morning oblivious to the fracture in his life, our shared life, beyond repair. The screen faded back to shadow, but the message seared into my thoughts, imprinted on my vision. No need to access the device, no urge for further details. What surged through me then wasn't a burst of fury, but a grim validation, the sensation of that last fragment in a dreadful enigma I'd resisted acknowledging, finally snapping together. Over recent months, subtle anomalies had piled up. Demetrius returned evenings later than usual, citing abrupt client sessions. Sudden journeys for work to Miami or the Pacific Northwest came with scant warning, leaving me little chance to probe. His mobile, once casually discarded, now sat screen down on surfaces or remained secured in his attire, even during restroom breaks. His computer, previously open to me, now demanded a fresh code. But the deepest sting came from his expression. Those eyes that once met mine with affection, with the ease of returning to sanctuary, now skimmed past, treating me like mere decor in the space, akin to the artwork on the wall that fades into oblivion after repeated glances. I'd frequently reassured myself, "You're overthinking, Avia," I'd murmured during restless vigils for his arrival. Fatigue strikes us all. Unions demand work. Avoid inventing crises from thin air. Now, positioned at the basin with paste overflowing, I yearned to rewind and shout at my former self. "Don't fool yourself, Ayla. Cease justifying his actions." I activated the tap swiftly, cleared my mouth, and splashed icy water over my features. My fingers stayed steady as I patted dry with cloth. Oddly, a hollow expanse gripped me, an icy, endless emptiness, as though my essence had slipped free from my form, surveying the scene from the room's edge. I observed my body press on with the motions, dab on lotion, dust with compact, swipe a subtle shade of balm. It resembled a scripted performance. Exiting the washroom, Demetrius was attired. He positioned himself before the expansive glass in our sleeping quarters, fastening a deep azure neckwear. He caught my image in the mirror and grinned. That familiar dawn grin, an expression that struck as the ugliest facade imaginable, the most striking sight I'd ever witnessed. "I've got a client workshop in Miami this coming weekend, darling," he mentioned as he adjusted his shirt collar. "Likely won't return till Sunday night. You good on your own?" I gave a measured nod. My words emerged even more monotone than anticipated. No feeling, no quiver. Absolutely. Remember to grab a thick coat. Evenings in Miami can turn brisk. I held back from questioning him about Zara. I avoided inquiring about the intimate apparel. I refused to dismantle the elaborate performance he'd crafted with such effort. For within my icy, vacant thoughts, another idea was starting to form. A strategy, a blueprint for retaliation. And until it was flawlessly arranged, I wouldn't breathe a syllable. I would execute my role flawlessly too, mirroring his own charade. That morning marked my debut as the star performer in the tragedy of his infidelity. I bestowed upon him the grin of a devoted spouse, despite the passion that had once blazed in my chest, now reduced to lifeless cinders. Yet from those remnants something tougher, more cutting was emerging. That evening dragged on more than ordinary. The clock's hands crept along with infuriating lethargy. Every tick resounded through the quiet of the flat. Demetrius showed up right on schedule, carrying a box of treats from my go-to patisserie, a minor token that once might have softened my resolve. But this evening, it came across as a hollow ritual, a bid to mask his deceptions with the allure of cocoa and custard. We shared a meal, discussing inconsequential matters, his duties at the office, the latest initiative I was deeply involved in, the increasingly chaotic Dallas roadways. Outwardly, all appeared routine, the polished veneer of a contented union we'd perfected over time. I turned into a vigilant watcher. I noted how Demetrius set his phone screen down on the surface, how his gaze flicked toward it now and then, pulled by some unseen force. I observed his grin that barely touched his eyes. Each tiny cue added to the proof, reinforcing the conviction that had rooted itself in my thoughts earlier that day. Demetrius followed a routine. Every Thursday evening, following his casual hoops game with the guys, he'd return, fix himself a pair of whiskey shots, and retire. That was his way to decompress. I was aware that following those sips, he'd plunge into slumber, dense and unyielding like rock, dreamless and oblivious to his surroundings. This night was a Thursday, a happenstance that struck me as fated. I lingered until his breaths grew steady and profound. A subtle aroma of bourbon blended with clean soap in the cool, filtered atmosphere of the bedroom. I rested next to him, gazing at the shadowed ceiling, allowing my pounding pulse to ease back to calm. The moment had come. Like an intruder in my own dwelling, I slipped from the sheets with utmost caution. I approached his edge of the mattress. There on the bedside table, his device was plugged in. The pale cord linked to the wall like a lifeline, powering it up. I carefully disconnected it. I was familiar with his print from that right forefinger. For years, I'd accessed his phone to schedule a wake-up or take a hands-free call while he drove. What had started as a gesture of faith now served as the latch to his trove of secrets. I lifted his slack hand. His flesh felt toasty. For a split second, a brief recollection struck me, the initial occasion when that palm clasped mine, so steadfast, so reassuring. I dismissed it swiftly. Sentimentality had no place here. Softly, I pressed his fingertip against the scanner. Click. The display glowed, exposing the neatly arranged icons. My pulse quickened a notch. Retreat was impossible now. I bypassed the chat application at first. Instead, I delved into the image collection. I sifted through scores of pictures of our life. Trips to the Caribbean, my celebration bash, spontaneous snaps he'd captured of me unaware. They seemed like artifacts from a stranger's existence. Then I spotted it. A concealed directory. It required a few attempts to crack the code. His birth date was far too predictable. Within lay a separate realm, the domain of Demetrius and Zara. Selfies of the pair in the vehicle, shots in softly illuminated coffee spots, and the most agonizing image. The duo posed before a quaint timber cabin that rang a bell. It was the retreat we'd acquired 2 years back in the Pocono Mountains, funded by my end-of-year incentive as our milestone present. The spot intended for forging our shared history. He was already forging one there, just without my involvement. There was even a shot of Zara by herself, beaming at the lens with a victorious air, clad in one of Demetrius's tops. A surge of queasiness climbed my gullet. I forced it down and pressed on. Following the visuals, I launched the texts. Their exchange read like a saga of disloyalty. Endearments, schemes for clandestine meetups, Demetrius's gripes about me, that I was overly fixated on my career, too distant that I'd lost interest in him. Each line landed like a blow. He was casting me as the antagonist in his narrative, framing his liaison as somehow my doing. And then I discovered additional details emerged about Zara. Her complete name was Zara Dree, serving as a sales rep for medical devices at a major drug firm. And crucially, in one of the earliest chats, I discovered the line that shifted my entire perspective. Elias will be away in Singapore on business all of next week. Our house will sit vacant. Elias, her spouse. So Zara was a cheater too. This went beyond just Demetrius and me. Someone else was suffering in this mess, another soul whose trust was shattered behind their back. In that moment, a grander, more daring plan took shape in my thoughts. It wasn't merely a spouse's payback anymore. This called for real accountability. Sleep evaded me that evening. With fingers now chilled and determined, I dove into action. I captured images of the vital exchanges, each picture from that concealed directory. I followed Demetrius's card activity, tied to my own account, expenses for Miami lodgings during his so-called conference dates, bills from upscale steakhouses we'd never dined at as a couple. I stored it all, stashing the files in a private directory on my computer. Overnight, I transformed into an investigator, piecing together the fragments of my partner's secret existence. As daybreak arrived, I uncovered the lead I needed. I entered Elias Vance on LinkedIn, pairing it with the architect term from their talks. And there he appeared. His headshot revealed a fellow with a firm chin, tousled locks, and a grin that, despite weariness, appeared genuine. His bio noted his role as head of an architecture outfit focused on eco-friendly builds. A twinge of sympathy hit me deep inside for this guy. He was another casualty, much like myself. I perched before my screen in the shadowy den, lit solely by its faint light. I drafted a brief note, erased it, redrafted repeatedly, over and over, hunting for the perfect phrasing. At last, I quit overthinking and simply typed, "Hello, Mr. Vance. I'm Avia Concade. I believe my husband Demetrius is involved with your wife, Zara. If you'd like, I can provide the proof I've gathered. Here's my contact number." I gazed at those words for long minutes. My thumb lingered above the dispatch icon. This marked the irreversible step. I drew in a steadying breath, deep and slow, then hit send. The note flew off. Demetrius's device was returned to its usual place, untouched in appearance. Dawn's light started filtering past the tall buildings. A fresh morning unfolded, and my battle was set to ignite. The hours after that button press dragged on with agonizing deliberation. Each tick felt like stubborn grit clinging in the timer. I slipped back to the sleeping quarters, positioned Demetrius's phone precisely as before, and headed to the lounge. I sank into the soft couch, yet tension gripped my frame. The usual morning brew, once a delight, now soured my palate. Outside the pain, Houston roused itself. Faint honks from vehicles, the low hum of motors firing up. It all echoed remotely, muffled, as though I dwelled in an insulated void. I gripped my cell tightly. It weighed like a live explosive, safety removed. Waiting was my sole option, for the blast or the dread silence of inaction. Suppose Elias dismissed it. Suppose he pegged me as a deranged, envious spouse aiming to wreck his union. Or worse, what if he rang Zara for verification and she looped in Demetrius? My scheme would collapse at launch. I'd end up exposed as an idiot, a pitiful sight. Anxieties swirled in my skull like a murder of ravens. I attempted to dispel them by flicking on the TV, booting up my machine for office mails, but nothing worked. Concentration eluded me entirely. The figures in my reports, typically sharp and orderly, now twisted chaotically. Avia Concade, the executive finance lead, renowned for poise and mastering intricate crises, sensed she'd forfeited command over her core reality, her personal world. 3 hours on, Demetrius emerged from the chamber. He sported a sharp navy top, damp strands combed neatly. He planted a casual peck on my brow, routine enough to scarcely register. "Off I go," he mentioned. "I'll ring once I'm in Miami." "Safe travels," I responded, mustering a grin. As he neared the exit, an intense impulse surged to yell, to hurl his deceptions at him on the spot. Yet I held back. Fiery, bursting fury was an indulgence I denied myself. What I harbored was an icy, unyielding fury, honed into a blade. Once Demetrius departed, the apartment grew eerily still and hollow. I passed the forenoon pacing between the lounge and galley, then back again, with every buzz from an email alert or team chat ping. My pulse raced wildly. Those 3 hours stretched like 3 decades. I was on the verge of surrendering. To shake off the nagging doubt that this whole plan was idiotic, I nearly jumped when the phone buzzed at last. An unfamiliar number lit up the display. My fingers shook a bit as I swiped to accept the call. I slipped out to the terrace for a breath of air, hoping to steady my pounding pulse. "Hi," I managed, forcing my tone to stay even. The line stayed quiet at first, just labored breaths echoing back. Then a low, weary male voice cut in. "Elias Vance here. I got your note." It matched the image I'd built in my head perfectly, steady on top but laced with a subtle shake, like the ground shifting beneath him. "Appreciate you reaching out," I responded. "Is this a prank?" He shot back, direct and no nonsense. "Straight to the point, I like it." "Wish it was," I admitted, my mouth going parched. "But it's real, unfortunately. I've got evidence, texts, pics, and details on their getaway this weekend." I caught his drawn-out exhale, the kind from a guy whose life just got flipped. This weekend, Zara claimed she was off to the Poconos with work buddies for a team-building escape. His tone turned inward, more musing than directed at me. "My spouse said he had a business conference down in Miami. Not even close," I fired back. "They're linking up at our cabin up in the Poconos." Dropping the Poconos name landed like a gut shot. The pause stretched heavy on his side. The cabin. The one I'd bought myself. The one he might have sketched out. Us both stabbed in the back in a spot that was truly ours. "What's your angle?" he pressed at last, his question thick with uncertainty. This was make or break. I drew in a sharp breath, mustering every ounce of grit. "I propose we show up there as a pair, right before they pop any bottles or shed their coats." Another hush fell. I pictured Elias there, mulling over my pitch. Wild idea, straight out of a flick. I'd braced for rejection, for him to call me unhinged. "No drama," he said after a beat. "No shouting matches." "Same here," I jumped in. "Just let them spot us, confront the facts with no space for fresh deceptions or dodges." His breaths grew audible once more. I sensed the tug-of-war inside him, the urge to bolt from this harsh truth clashing with the pull to stare it down. "Fine," he conceded eventually. That one syllable carried weight, mixed with surrender and resolve. but we link up beforehand. Need to check out the proof myself. Relief hit me like a tide, buckling my legs. I wasn't in this solo anymore. I'd found a partner. Absolutely, I agreed. What's the time and spot? We settled on the following morning, Saturday, at a modest roadside cafe off I-80 and a rest stop. Neutral ground, smack in the middle of our fractured lives. Once the call ended, I lingered on the terrace, gazing at Houston's bustling skyline. My outlook had transformed. The void from earlier that day was now brimming with focus, a peculiar bond born from mutual hurt. Two outsiders bound by treachery, ready to weather this chaos side by side. Come Saturday, clouds hung low, mirroring the strain hanging in the atmosphere. I hit the highway solo amid the morning rush. The tunes that usually kept me company felt grating now, so I killed the stereo. All that remained was the road's steady rumble under the wheels and the engine's soft drone. My thoughts buzzed like a swarm, replaying every conceivable outcome, every twist that might unfold. Spotting Elias, I pulled into the rest area a full 30 minutes early. The place hummed with activity. Families off on getaways, drivers pausing to recharge. I ducked into a quiet booth at the edge of the cafe. A plain black coffee arrived, and I claimed a seat with a clear line to the door. I tracked every entrant and exit. Each chime of the entrance bell spiked my heart rate. Right on the dot at 10 OSU, a lanky figure in a beige coat pushed through. His steps were purposeful, yet his posture sagged a touch, burdened by something unseen. I knew him right away from his online photo. Elias. The exhaustion in his gaze hit harder up close. He scanned the room, and our stares locked. A spark of awareness passed. I tipped my head subtly. He approached my booth and dropped into the opposite seat. No chatter, no hellos, no intros. We'd connected already in the most twisted, agonizing fashion. Grab a drink, I suggested, aiming to ease the awkward quiet. He declined with a shake. Nah, thanks, let's dive in. I let out a breath and fished myself from my bag. I set it down midway between my mug and a tiny sanitizer bottle. Flipping to the Photos app, I found the dedicated file and nudged it his way. Everything's in there, I murmured. Elias eyed the device a second before grasping it. His grip was strong and steady, the sort of hands belonging to a builder, the hands of a creator. He's the kind of person who constructs with his hands. The twist was brutally ironic. Those very hands that had crafted so many creations were now cradling proof of utter destruction. He began swiping his thumb over the display. I observed his expression intently. His jaw tightened as he scanned the tender exchanges between Demetrius and Zara. A faint twitch appeared in his temple while he examined their joyful selfies. He paused his breathing upon spotting the receipts from credit cards, lavish hotel stays, and intimate meals. Yet his most intense response hit with a specific image, Zara striking a pose on the bungalow's porch in the Poconos. His fingers clenched around the device, knuckles paling as his stare locked onto the backdrop. The timber supports he'd selected, the balustrades pattern, the decking stones. Right then, it hit me that he wasn't merely viewing an image of his cheating spouse. He was confronting treachery embedded in his personal creation. He was witnessing deception, invading a haven he'd forged through his labor and vision. He set the phone down on the surface with deliberate care, like handling delicate crystal. Reclining in his seat, he shut his eyes briefly and released a profoundly weary exhale. I handpicked those deck stones myself, he rasped. Every tiny aspect of that place came from my choices. Zara would claim she avoided it often, saying it felt too still. He emitted a bitter, empty chuckle. Looks like she just didn't enjoy it with me. Quietness settled over us. I allowed him space to absorb it all. I'd felt that ache before. The sting of discovering a cherished spot had been tainted. I had my suspicions, he repeated, staring blankly out the pane. She'd been pulling away for months, snapping over nothing. She dodged real conversations, even therapy sessions for us, always blaming my long hours, saying I ignored her. Makes sense now. She craved my absence because she was pouring her energy into another man. Now it was time for me to reveal Demetrius's side, the tiny deceptions piling up into an overwhelming pile, my brushed-off emotions, our stretched budget from his extravagant habits, a detail hidden from him. We conversed for nearly 60 minutes, not like unfamiliar faces, but as fellow sufferers adrift in the gale of infidelity. Isolation had lifted. "I've got an extra key to the cabin," Elias announced abruptly. His look met mine with fresh resolve shining through. "Zara has no clue I held onto it. Demetrius figures I'm off on a work jaunt to Barbados this weekend. He wouldn't dream I'm close to the Poconos." "We'll head out ahead then," Elias decided. "Ambush them on sight, but remember, keep it calm. No outbursts or drama. Just occupy the space. Let our presence and the facts unravel everything." I nodded in full support. The scheme solidified into something concrete. We hashed out the logistics. They'd show up near 6 p.m. the following day. We'd arrive at dawn to prepare the scene. We'd serve as both observers and key players in the closing chapter of our unions. As we separated outside the eatery, no formal grip or drawn-out goodbye. Just a quick tilt of the head, a wordless bond. Allies in this agonizing quest. On the drive home, an odd sensation washed over me. My load hadn't eased, but sharing it changed everything. Another soul got it. Another would brace beside me when the tempest hit. Clouds lingered overhead, yet a subtle gleam pierced the horizon. Not optimism for mending the irreparable, but illumination for a clear closure. For the moment, that sufficed. Come Sunday dawn, I departed Houston amid a soft lavender twilight. Traffic flowed smoothly, letting me travel in quiet reflection alone. Beyond the urban sprawl, fresh breezes slipped through the cracked window, scents of briny sea air blended with evergreen notes. The Poconos, meant as a sanctuary of fond recollections, now loomed as the arena of confrontation. The cabin sat tucked away down a twisting lane fringed by dense woods. Pulling onto the crunching path, I spotted it, a sturdy 2-level timber home merging seamlessly with the landscape, stunning, peaceful, brimming with deceit. I pulled my SUV alongside a gleaming silver vehicle already parked, Elias's ride. He'd beaten me there. My pulse quickened. This was unfolding for real, no turning back. I snatched my bag from the front seat, drew a deep, steadying inhale, and stepped outside. The Pocono chill carried a misty touch. Faint waves crashing afar set a somber rhythm. The entrance wasn't secured. I eased it ajar and stepped inside. Elias stood by the expansive window overlooking the water. He clutched a mug of coffee sat before him, wisps of vapor curling upward. He remained facing away as I stepped inside, sensing my arrival without a glance. "Have you been waiting long?" My words came out slightly raspy. "About an hour," he answered, eyes fixed on the water. I paused to take in the familiar surroundings once more. His point hit home. I set my bag on an armchair and joined him, gazing at the vista. That day the lake lay serene, its surface a muted steel hue. Standing there, memories flooded back of being right here with Demetrius 3 years prior, right after the miscarriage. He'd embraced me close, vowing we'd overcome it all side by side, that this very spot would bear witness to our renewed joy. Now that vow tasted like venom. "I was last here 3 years ago," I murmured, mostly to myself rather than Elias, "after losing our baby." Elias finally swiveled to face me. In his weary gaze flickered genuine empathy, not pitying but the understanding of one who's endured deep grief. "Zara craved kids just as much," he murmured gently. "After 2 unsuccessful IVF rounds, she quit mentioning it. I figured grief had silenced her, but her thoughts were elsewhere." We lapsed into quiet again, each immersed in private anguish. No sobs escaped, just a weighty hush brimming with unvoiced regrets and shattered oaths. In that quiet, an odd connection formed. We weren't pals or even casual knowers. We were a pair of scarred spirits amid the wreckage of our unions, striving not to collapse in tandem. Are we pushing boundaries too hard? A flicker of uncertainty stirred within me. Elias gave a deliberate shake of his head, eyes returning to the lake. No, if this were solely payback, perhaps. But it's deeper. It's making them confront the raw facts, unmasked. It's seizing back the honesty they stripped away. His statement bolstered my resolve. He was spot on. This wasn't vengeance. It was ending our torment. It was sealing a phase without loose ends or fresh deceptions. "Let's prepare the setting," I declared, my tone steadier now. We sprang into action, not as gracious entertainers readying a gathering, but as meticulous sleuths piecing together a felony's aftermath. Each gesture carried weight, a wordless ceremony. I began by wiping down the lengthy oak table dominating the space, the very one where Demetrius and Zara likely schemed their deceptions time and again. I polished it to a gleam, as if scouring away remnants of their treachery. Elias fetched a bottle of Merlot from his vehicle. "Zara's go-to," he noted, centering it on the table, a tiny thing that cut deep. From the cupboard, I retrieved 4 crystal tumblers, the ones Demetrius always demanded for our visits, his way of flaunting sophistication. I arranged them neatly, 2 per side, forming an ideal setup for the showdown. We repositioned a couple of oversized chairs to angle outward from the door. This ensured that upon entering, they'd circle around and encounter us directly. No sneaking up. We'd greet them squarely. The illumination in the room shifted to a soft golden glow, not harsh enough to spike nerves, yet sharp sufficient to reveal every subtle shift in their features soon to come. We craved visibility, the shock, the remorse, the dread. What reaction do you foresee? I wondered while we paused to survey our setup. The space appeared utterly ordinary, tranquil, a flawless snare. Elias shrugged. "Zara will weep. It's her go-to tactic. Demetrius, unclear, anger, maybe please. But one certainty. Neither anticipates our full awareness. They won't expect us." The afternoon waned as we conversed, steering clear of the infidelity to focus inward. I shared my vision of launching a cozy bookshop in San Diego, a goal Demetrius dismissed as fanciful. Elias confessed his near abandonment of architecture for a stint in France, mastering baking. We reflected on the selves we'd forfeited years back, smothered beneath concessions and concessions in our wedded lives. Beyond the windows, the heavens gradually blushed amber. The clock chimed 5. "Under 2 hours left," I whispered. "Nervous?" Elias inquired. I met his stare. Not of the facts themselves, but of pardoning the unforgivable. He inclined his head thoughtfully. We stepped onto the porch, aligned shoulder to shoulder, observing the dusk. A soft gust from the lake carried scents of fur and serenity. Moments felt suspended. We stood prepared. The scene awaited. All that remained was the arrival of the main players. By 5:57 p.m., the atmosphere in the cabin hung heavy and charged, like a taut wire ready to break. Elias and I sat motionless in the armchairs we'd arranged, our backs to the doorway. We resembled immobile figures anticipating the start of the drama. Between us on the table rose the bottle of Merlot, accompanied by a pair of vacant crystal tumblers. Beside my chair lay a bulky envelope made of manila paper. It contained every piece of evidence required, duplicates of their exchanges, excerpts from credit card bills, and even a short audio clip from a conversation with Demetrius's assistant, who offhandedly verified that no conference was planned in Miami over this weekend. We hadn't shown up unprepared. Suddenly, the grind of tires on the gravel path broke through. In the quiet, it stabbed right into my chest. Elias glanced my way. His gaze posed the question silently. I offered no reply. Instead, I gave a quick, resolute nod. The moment had arrived. A sleek black Range Rover halted directly before the porch. The expansive windows gave us a clear view. Demetrius emerged first from the driver's seat. Dressed in a leather coat, he held a compact suitcase in one hand and a shopping bag in the other. He appeared at ease, content. Moments later, Zara alighted from the passenger side, clutching a bunch of soft pink tulips. Their shared laughter drifted toward us, light and unburdened. They resembled a fresh honeymoon pair reaching their private retreat. The image twisted like a blade in my stomach. Their facade of joy rested on the foundation of our suffering. The key rasped in the latch. The door of wood swung inward with a faint groan. Zara entered ahead, her grin lingering. She glided gracefully across the threshold. Her scan of the space halted her expression mid-bloom, as though life itself had been suspended. Those once sparkling eyes grew wide, shifting from bewilderment to dread as they traveled from me to Elias at my side. Demetrius, trailing behind, collided with her when she halted abruptly. "Everything okay, darling?" His tone remained upbeat. Then he raised his eyes, tracing her stare. In that split second, our gazes locked. I watched the transformation unfold rapidly. Bewilderment, astonishment, refusal, and ultimately a raw fear that hung in the air. The shopping bag tumbled from his grasp. The Dom Perignon bottle within tumbled over the hardwood and struck the table's base. Pop. A brief fizz erupted, accompanied by the gurgle of froth spilling out, saturating the air with a pungent booze aroma. Zara's lips parted, yet silence ensued. The tulip slipped from her hold. The fragile pink blooms scattered over the planks. It formed an ideal symbol for the event unfolding, their delusion in ruins. The quiet, disrupted briefly by the champagne's noise, settled back denser and more oppressive. I allowed the instant to stretch a bit, permitting them to absorb their predicament completely. Then I addressed them. "Welcome to your little escape." My words emerged soft like a whisper of wind, composed, clashing sharply with the charged tension. "We've laid out the wine, the chairs, and the facts." Demetrius stood rigid, mouth clamped tight, complexion ashen. Zara retreated a partial step, her eyes flicking to Elias as though pleading for aid and a way out of this horror. Yet no exit existed. No refuge remained. The veil had lifted. The performance was set to commence. Shards from the shattered champagne gleamed on the floorboards, catching the room's gentle glow. The biting alcohol odor now blended with the scent of crushed, fading tulips. Amid that minor disorder, we four stayed immobile, ensnared in an otherworldly scene. Demetrius stirred first, the initial one to attempt reconstructing a world that had splintered into countless fragments. "Avia," he started, throat rough. He advanced a pace, extending a palm as if to soothe me, treating me like some feral creature requiring restraint. This isn't what it seems." A brief, arid chuckle devoid of mirth slipped from me. The tired old line, the go-to shield for every exposed adulterer. "Is that so?" I replied, cocking my head a fraction. "Then pray tell, what ought it to resemble?" "Walk me through it, Demetrius. How do I interpret Zara's text about counting the minutes until you joined her in our cabin, or that fancy lingerie she'd arranged just for you?" Demetrius's features collapsed. Evidently, he hadn't anticipated such precise revelations. His glance shot to Zara, brimming with alarm. I pressed on, tone steady and neutral like an attorney reciting accusations. "How about those credit card hits at high-end steakhouses we never visited as a pair? Or the Uber log showing your trip to Zara's area at a time you claimed to be buried in overtime in the office?" Each query landed like a punch. I could tell from how his shoulders sagged and how he dodged my stare. Now it was Elias's moment to rise. He avoided glancing at Demetrius entirely. Instead, his gaze locked onto his spouse, Zara, who shivered by the doorway. "And me, Zara," Elias uttered, his tone gravelly and quivering with barely restrained feelings. "What should I believe? You claimed it was a business getaway in the Poconos alongside your colleagues. You even messaged me right before powering down your cell last evening. Sweet dreams. Thinking of you. Yeah, right, I muttered quietly to myself. Elias's inquiry cracked Zara's walls wide open. The sobs she'd suppressed came flooding out at last. She buried her face in her palms and wept uncontrollably. Elias, stop this, please, she choked out amid the tears. Halt what? Elias's pitch climbed, his agony now echoing clearly. Halt from standing here and facing you down, from hearing the reality, from witnessing my partner betraying me right in the home I constructed myself. That final remark stung harshly, even in my eyes. This dwelling was his masterpiece. Every nook reflected his craftsmanship and devotion, and they'd desecrated it. I approached the desk and lifted the hefty envelope I'd assembled. I left it sealed. With a deliberate thud, I let it fall onto the surface, seizing everyone's focus. I'm not here for a fight, I declared, reclaiming authority in the space once more. I've brought proof. Demetrius eyed the packet like a deadly serpent. In a surge of rage and despair, he grabbed it and ripped it apart in one swift motion. He extracted a bundle of documents. I observed as his gaze raced over the content. The shift in his features was stark once he spotted the records of their exchanges, the snapshots, the money trails. His eyes, once wild with fear, now blazed with wrath. Moments later, he flung the sheets across the ground. Were you tracking me? He bellowed, his composure shattering at last. I met his stare unflinchingly. I didn't tail you, Demetrius. I verified what was real, a reality I doubted far too long. And since your deceptions were so precise, I needed to dig even deeper to uncover it. Zara had slumped into a seat at the table, her frame shaking with cries. Elias made no effort to console her. He remained rooted, studying his wife through a haze of letdown, fury, and profound sorrow. How extended? Elias directed at Zara. His timbre had settled back to its bass register, yet it carried an icy edge now. 7 months, Zara breathed softly. 7 months. That's 210 days of deceit. A tightness gripped my heart. Over those 7 months, I'd still been striving to be a devoted partner, attempting to mend the fractures in our union, oblivious that I battled solo. Demetrius stepped closer once more, his expression begging this time. Aya, I messed up badly. I realize it was a huge error, but it doesn't erase my affection for you. I retreated a pace, widening the gap. Enough, I commanded, my words wavering for the first instance, not from grief, but from fury cresting to its peak. Spare me your talk of affection, Demetrius. If the affection you mean involves straying with someone else, I want none of it. I halted, summoning a sharp recollection as I scanned the surroundings. And if it's the sort that lets you escort your lover to the exact spot where we mourned our lost baby, then hold on to it yourself. My statement lingered like a poisonous fog. Silence engulfed the room utterly. Zara's weeping halted too. I watched Demetrius stiffen, his countenance drained as though struck. His lips parted, yet nothing emerged. That shared scar, our gravest hurt, stood as the unbeatable strike he couldn't counter. I granted him a final glance. You can exit now or stay and hear it through. But if you believe forgiveness lingers as an option, you truly don't know me. Elias shifted toward Zara, then toward me. I require some fresh air. I inclined my head. Same here. We exited together, brushing past Demetrius and Zara, frozen in place. We stepped out to the porch, abandoning them amid the ruins of the falsehoods we'd just exploded. Beyond, the Pocono heavens neared full night. The water appeared to thunder more fiercely. The tempest was only starting. Several minutes later on the porch, allowing the cool breeze to steady our minds, we re-entered the den. The vibe within resembled a battlefield's aftermath. Demetrius and Zara occupied distinct seats now, distanced widely, eyes averted from one another. The betrayal's documents lay strewn about like withered foliage on the floor. the atmosphere weighed down with remorse and harsh verity. I pulled over a chair from the dining area and positioned it squarely before Demetrius. Elias took a spot next to me, his stare unwavering, chill, and pointed at Zara. A prolonged quiet held until I set down another folder on the surface. This one was blue, unlike I picked up that manila envelope from earlier, and the room's vibe shifted in an instant. "Demetrius," I started, staring straight into his eyes. "Have you ever explained to Zara why we've kept our bank accounts separate for the last 6 years?" Demetrius stiffened visibly. He gazed at me with desperate eyes. "Avia, this isn't relevant at all. Let me explain." I cut him off sharply, not giving him a chance to dodge. I shifted my attention to Zara, whose face now showed pure bewilderment. "Zara, you might not realize this, but the man you hold in such high regard, Demetrius, amassed over $50,000 in gambling debts back in 2018. His folks had to cover it quietly to protect his job. That's when I insisted on splitting our money, not from suspicion, but because I'd witnessed how expertly he could conceal something so massive." Zara's shock was unmistakable and real. "Avia, you shouldn't bring that up. It's unrelated to now," Demetrius shot back. "It absolutely is," I replied steadily. "Everything here revolves around deception. Demetrius, you excused your cheating by claiming to your lover that I was always occupied, distant, but you conveniently omitted how I've shouldered the bulk of our expenses. I've covered the mortgage on this bungalow month after month while you threw money away on bets and hid the truth." Demetrius bowed his head low. He was out of words. My revelation had stripped away every justification he had. Next came Elias's moment. His tone was steady, yet icy as he addressed Zara. "And you, Zara, you claimed the bank was stalling on the loan for our roof repair. In reality, you funneled almost $10,000 to a treatment center in New Jersey. The recipient, Jamal Dupree, your brother, correct?" Zara went mute, her complexion draining to an even ghostly shade. "I didn't mean to burden you." "No," Elias responded. "You just refused to be honest. You've maintained dual existences, one alongside me, another with Demetrius. The real tragedy is that each one rested on hidden truths. You deceived me about your family's issues, and I bet you kept them from Demetrius too." Silence enveloped the space once more. I inclined my head gradually. "That's your sole shared trait," I remarked, glancing from Demetrius to Zara in turn. "Neither of you has ever been upfront, not with your partners, and apparently not even between yourselves. You've merely presented polished facades you assumed the other desired." Zara broke into fresh sobs. "I never intended for it to escalate like this." "But you allowed it to," I shot back. "I'm unsure which hurts worse, the betrayal itself or discovering that the betrayer lacks the courage to own their mistakes right from the beginning." Demetrius raised his gaze. His eyes were bloodshot, weary. "Avia," he murmured, "this, none of it, should destroy our marriage. We shared so many wonderful times." There it was, his final plea, the past. "You're right, Demetrius," I acknowledged. "We did create plenty of cherished moments, but deciding to swap them for the vague excitement of an entanglement with someone who couldn't even be straight with her own spouse forces me to shield my future from your reckless choices." Elias faced Zara, then met my eyes. "I require some space." "Same here," I agreed. Right then, as every layer of the deceit lay exposed and we believed no further shocks awaited, Zara rose abruptly. Her fingers clutched the chair's arm tightly. Her eyes, swollen from tears, held a blend of dread and disorientation. "There's one more thing," I held back. Her words quivered. All attention locked onto her. Elias's brow furrowed. Demetrius eyed her warily. Zara gulped down air. Her glance flicked to Demetrius before settling on me. "I'm expecting." the room plunged into total quiet, so profound that the steady tick of the wooden wall clock echoed like thunder. Each tick felt like a knife carving through the tension. Demetrius bolted from his seat. "What? Repeat that." Zara dipped her head, lips shaking. "I learned it last week. Plan to share it with you this weekend." Her final words aimed at Demetrius. Elias stood rigid, expression blank. Then, in a near-silent murmur, he questioned, "Is it mine?" Zara pivoted toward him, tears flowing anew. "Yes, definitely." Demetrius and I took precautions. My reality spun wildly. For moments, my thoughts emptied. Nothing had braced us for this twist. No guidebook existed, no strategy for handling the detonating crisis that had erupted among us. The news of a child on the way transformed this clash into a far more intricate ordeal, infinitely more agonizing. Demetrius snapped out of it first, yet his response wasn't one of a lover learning of impending fatherhood. Astonishment lingered, but revulsion and contempt overpowered it. His gaze darted from Zara's features to her midsection and back. "Carrying his child," he rasped, throat tight. He jabbed a finger toward Elias with something about the disdain in his voice. The way he spat out the word him like it was a curse made it clear he saw the pregnancy as nothing more than a pesky obstacle, a blemish on their flawless getaway. For the first time that evening, a spark of resolve flickered in Zara's eyes. Amid the tears and her puffy features, she fixed Demetrius with a piercing glare. "Don't refer to him that way," she snapped. "He has a name, Elias, my spouse. And sure, I messed up by deceiving him, but I never misled him about my emotions toward you." Zara's declaration hit Demetrius like two brutal strikes. The initial one confirmed the child wasn't his. The follow-up carried the subtle charge that his affection for me was all pretense. I observed as Demetrius retreated a pace, his expression turning into a blank slate. Maybe stunned, humiliated, or simply hollowed out by the dawning truth of his total defeat. He'd forfeited me, and it seemed he'd never really possessed Zara either. She was merely a brief diversion, a fleeting refuge. As the trio tangled in this fresh turmoil, an odd sense of lucidity washed over me. Zara's condition was startling, yet it altered nothing for my path. This mess belonged to them, the fallout from their choices. Their turmoil ceased to be mine. That tangled web they'd just woven actually reinforced my resolve to sever every link binding me to them. I drew in a steadying breath, steadying the brief surge in my heartbeat. I was back to being the Avia I'd always been, the composed, strategic CFO, laser-focused on outcomes. "I believe we've endured sufficient shocks for tonight." My words sliced through the heavy air among them. I bent down and retrieved my handbag from the ground. From it, I extracted one final folder, bound in deep crimson. I set it down deliberately on the low table beside the untouched wine bottle. And with all cards on the table, I'll skip the drawn-out explanations. I flipped open the folder, revealing neatly arranged documents within. "This contains the divorce filing and every financial record I've compiled," I clarified. "Our shared holdings are already divided into individual accounts under legal oversight. My lawyer has reviewed it all. Not like certain folks here who've concealed so much." Demetrius stared at the stack, eyes wide with incredulity. "Avia, you can review it immediately or balk at signing." I pressed on, brushing aside the desperation in his tone. "Either way, my choice stands firm." On the far side of the space, Zara had collapsed back into her seat. Her palms curved protectively over her midsection. Elias faced her, the ice in his demeanor gradually thawing into a look of fatigue and acceptance. "I require a moment to absorb this," he said to her, his tone low yet measured. "But should you bring that baby into the world, I'll support it. The innocent kid bears no blame." A trace of solace appeared on Zara's features. She dipped her head, overwhelmed by emotion, to reply. "I understand. Appreciate you voicing that." My gaze returned to Demetrius. If there's more you wish to add, now's your chance." He raised his chin. His gaze was bloodshot, drained. "Avia," he murmured, "this doesn't justify dismantling our union. We've shared countless joyful times." I inclined my head. "Indeed, Demetrius, plenty of fond recollections. Yet your willingness to swap them for the hazy excitement of a liaison with a woman who deceived her own partner forces me to shield my future from your poor judgments." From my blazer, I withdrew a pen. With deliberate strokes, I initialed every necessary section. In the hushed room, the scratch of ink on page rang out crisply. Each mark brought liberation. No longer was I grasping at a brittle bond, no longer feigning faith in an unworthy soul. As I set the pen aside, a profound ease settled in, greater than I'd known in ages. I regarded Demetrius, once the embodiment of my early dreams, my envisioned life together. "Best wishes," I said. "You'll need them." Rising to my feet, I noted Elias standing as well. He offered a brief, courteous incline. "I'll be in the vehicle, Miss Consincade. Call if there's anything you require." I acknowledged him with a nod, thankful for his steady demeanor that evening. Just before departing, Zara edged closer, tentative. "I realize I have no right to seek pardon," she whispered. "But honestly, I never intended for it to escalate like this." Meeting her stare squarely, I felt no lingering fury, just sharp insight. "The real threats aren't those who admit their flaws," I advised her. "It's the ones who convince themselves they're virtuous while embracing deception." She paused, struck by the remark, then averted her eyes. I exited the cabin without a backward glance, abandoning Demetrius to gape at the documents and Zara curled up nearby, arms wrapped around the one certainty she now embraced, the new life she'd confessed to carrying. We departed the cabin near 9 p.m. that night. No farewells echoed. They weren't called for. We proceeded quietly. The only sound was the grit of pebbles beneath the crunch of tires shattered the quiet of the evening. Elias held the car door open for me, a polite move that seemed out of place amid all the turmoil. He slid behind the wheel next. Pausing before turning the key, he glanced my way. "Feeling peckish," he murmured. "There's this cozy joint downtown in Scranton that stays open till late. Not upscale or anything, but their soul food hits the spot like nothing else." I chuckled. A rough, surprising sound, yet utterly genuine. Following all the upheaval, the sobs and deceptions, that straightforward query struck me as refreshingly ordinary. "Absolutely," I said. "Head there. I'm famished." We settled into adjacent seats at the unpretentious eatery, bathed in the glow of a buzzing neon sign. A soft amber light bathed the scarred oak table between us. We steered clear of dissecting the recent events. Rather, we chatted about calmer topics, like the moment Elias toyed with ditching architecture for baking classes, or my long-forgotten vision of launching a cafe bookshop in San Diego, scrapped when Demetrius labeled it impractical. Once the meal ended, we parted with a straightforward clasp of hands and a wordless tilt of heads. Romance never sparked between us, yet that evening I realized I'd acquired something deeper, a true companion, one who'd navigated the bleakest hours alongside me. Half a year on, I found myself on the veranda of a modest home in San Diego, California, cradling a steaming cup of ginger tea. I gazed as the surf advanced on the shore, the split from Demetrius wrapped up in under 2 months. Owing to my thorough groundwork, the papers, the proofs, and the neatly outlined holdings, he offered little fight. He likely grasped that drawing it out would cost him even more. I ended up with most of our shared property, plus a payout for the Poconos cabin, which I promptly sold back to him. I had no use for a spot haunted by old shadows. Demetrius's role at the finance company hit a snag. His superior, a no-nonsense yet equitable leader, caught wind of the mess in his private world. No formal word ever passed, but he gradually got edged out of key initiatives. From a front-runner for the upcoming CEO slot, he dropped to managing a lesser group. Zara delivered her baby just last week. Elias messaged me. She's arrived, a robust little girl. Emotions are tangled, but we're giving it a go. He included a snapshot, a minuscule fist gripping Zara's digit. Elias eyed the lens with a softness I'd never witnessed in him. Whether they'd reunite romantically remained unclear, but evidently, even if delayed, they were starting to embrace candor toward one another and inward. As for me, I dwell solo in my seaside dwelling, close enough to the city's energy yet serene, sufficient to catch the breeze's whisper at dawn. I've switched professions. Gone is the CFO life. Now I'm an independent financial advisor, dictating my own rhythm. No endless sessions. No late-night inbox assaults. Plus, I'm mastering the art of pausing, recharging, inhaling deeply. Elias and I stay connected. Not often, but reliably. Occasionally a seasonal note, or a note like, spotted in stunning French-inspired villa blueprint in La Jolla. It brought you to mind. Pure wonder. Or perhaps a quick 15-minute chat checking in. You holding up? That's plenty for me. We endured one of the longest evenings imaginable as partners. And though unspoken, I sense we're bonded. The sort of connection beyond titles, grasped in a single glance. That day I lounged on my deck with my go-to novel as gentle jazz drifted from a compact player nearby. Demetrius no longer occupied my thoughts. Gone were the aches and second-guessings, replaced by a tranquility as steady as a still sea. I weathered what once appeared insurmountable, and crucially, I rediscovered my core self. Demetrius played a key role in my existence, but he wasn't the endgame. He arrived to deliver a costly tutorial, to jolt me awake and show that faith isn't for squandering on the undeserving. That affection fades without truth, and unthinking devotion erodes our self-value. If queried today, Aya, any regrets? I'd reply firmly, none. For certain folks enter our paths not to linger, but to signal when to move on. My tale isn't a downfall, it's a path to renewal. From a deceived spouse, I evolved into a resilient woman who mended her wounds and rekindled self-love. At times, releasing the old paves room for far greater gains, and I'm thankful for the bravery to depart at that pivotal instant. 3 years, a span that echoes like a full era while feeling mere hours ago. I perched on my yard terrace, nursing a mug of Jamaican Blue Mountain Brew and a partly used journal. From this vantage, I overlooked my little veggie garden. The cherry tomatoes bursting with life, the bell peppers ripening to a vibrant red, and the basil giving off its invigorating aroma with each gust of wind. Far off, the Pacific Ocean lay expansive and intensely blue beneath the bright morning heavens. 3 years back on this very day, I found myself in a cabin in the Poconos, on the verge of shattering my entire existence. Now, here I sit in the fresh reality I've constructed from those ashes, and this new reality seems far sturdier, far more tangible. I rarely dwell on Demetrius these days, not out of any conscious effort to push him away, but simply because he no longer lingers in my thoughts. His recollection feels like a faded film I viewed long ago. I recall the storyline. A handful of moments stand out, yet the raw feelings that once gripped me have softened into a gentle detachment. A couple of months back, a former acquaintance from Houston messaged me. She'd bumped into Demetrius unexpectedly at a property expo. She mentioned he seemed altered, slimmer, more subdued. He departed his previous company a year following our split and had taken up with a modest builder in Atlanta. He'd relocated, embarking on a fresh chapter. I scanned the note with utter neutrality. No glee over his downfall, no lingering hurt, just a calm recognition. His journey had ceased to intersect with mine. He was now merely an unfamiliar figure who'd once occupied my nights for years. I wished him serenity in my prayers, not on his account but for my own sake, because extending that wish signaled my full liberation. My bond with Elias persists, evolving into a rare and authentic camaraderie. We connect via video each month. His call arrived while I tended to my garden. His image filled the display, bearing that familiar, weary grin, though his gaze now held a newfound gleam. In the background, a curly-haired toddler dashed about, giggling. "That's our Nora. She's finally mastered saying your name right," Elias noted with a subtle grin as Nora clung to his knee. It required 2.5 years for her to settle on Elias over Lay. "You seem content," I replied with a smile. "She's everything to me," he answered. He hesitated, his expression growing earnest. "Zara and I gave it our best. We're devoted to Nora as parents, but together as partners, we've seen that some fractures can't be mended. We parted ways peacefully 6 months back. This feels right, more genuine. No hidden truths, no facades, just a united front for our child's upbringing." The update didn't catch me off guard. Certain rifts run too profoundly to mend. "I'm sorry, yet relieved you've chosen transparency," I told him. "Indeed, transparency," he agreed. "A costly realization." "And you, Aya," he inquired, "has some fortunate soul captured your affections amid that paradise isle?" "My heart's not up for grabs at the moment," I responded. "I'm fully occupied cherishing it on my own, and it brings immense joy. My role as a financial advisor has infused me with renewed direction. I go beyond assisting recently separated women in sorting their budgets. I absorb their narratives. In their expressions, I spot the identical dread I once harbored. Apprehension about tomorrow, isolation's shadow, and I assure them with unshakable certainty, "You'll thrive. You're far tougher than you realize." For I embody that truth. I've emerged as a guiding light for vessels once ensnared in the very tempest that battered me. I've reshaped my wounds into a guide for fellow travelers seeking their inner selves. As the sun dipped westward, I shut my journal and strolled to the shoreline beyond my home. I slipped off my flip-flops, allowing the heated grains to caress my feet, while the sea's spray moistened them. People frequently inquire, "Have you pardoned Demetrius?" Hitiswani, for ages I lacked clarity on that, but clarity has dawned. Absolution wasn't the aim. I didn't require absolving him to mend. What mattered was embracing it all, embracing the events as they unfolded, embracing my profound hurt of the past, embracing how that anguish reshaped me, and above all, absolving myself for overlooking the warnings sooner, absolving myself for my past innocence in romance, absolving myself for believing wholeness demanded someone else. Emptiness no longer haunts me. I stand whole in solitude, yet not isolated. My days may hum with less clamor now, but they brim with profound calm. They're rich in modest joys, the aroma of morning brew, the delight in witnessing my greenery flourish, a client's joyous outburst upon purchasing her initial vehicle with her earnings, and naturally, the perpetual murmur of waves speaking to me as the heavens shift to hues of orange, rose, and violet. For me, a fresh beginning dawned ages ago, and daily I offer thanks for that awakening, knowing the battles I waged to reach it. I cease glancing rearward. Ahead lies the horizon, as boundless and stunning as the waters I survey, and for the first time ever, I'm unafraid to venture into it solo. Did you enjoy the tale? And from which city are you tuning in? Let's connect below. Should the story resonate, consider a super thanks to help me deliver more tales like this. Stories like this one. Thanks a ton for your kind encouragement. I can't wait to hear your thoughts on the tale. Right there on your screen are 2 fresh biographies I really suggest checking out. My channel's packed with even more goodies. Make sure to subscribe until the next biography with warmth and admiration.